Welcome to another episode of the Kick and Cover podcast. We have Coach Nick Schroder with us today from Lincoln Way Central High School in New Lenox, Illinois, just outside of Chicago by about 40-45 minutes. Coach, how you doing?
Great, Coach. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Can't complain. Wouldn't do any good if I did. So by the time this airs, we will be long past the state clinic, which I've mercifully trying to get through and studying and editing videos and uploading and whatever.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I know it's great. I mean, we got some good guys, and I think at this point, as we're filming this, I think we've announced 7. We should announce at least another 90, so at minimum. So we'll see. So we'll go from there.
Very cool.
So we kind of met. I mean, we have obviously a mutual acquaintance who kind of put us together, messaged me, and said if you need a special teams guy, here you go. And we've kind of reached out and talked a little bit since then. So, what I've kind of done for the past couple episodes, and as normal listeners will know, I'm gonna kind of just let you go. Coach sent me his presentation ahead of time, and it's some really good stuff. It's very organized, looks very good. So it kind of, you can kind of just see it based off the picture that, it's on your screen for those of you watching and not listening to the audio. Coach has got some detail and good stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to let Coach Schroder go into special teams thoughts.
Cool. I appreciate it, Coach. And I know I got a slide here with some thank yous coming, and you're one of the guys I definitely want to thank. And I know you shared some big news through Twitter the other day too, so we'll get to that. But just kind of here on the first slide, these are just kind of special teams thoughts for me as I served as a coordinator in the past and continue to always focus on specials. One of the reasons I love specials is because you work with everyone in your team or in your program based on, hey, it doesn't matter if they're offense or defense or play quarterback, they might be the holder, whatever it is. So I truly love special teams, try to follow it as much as I can. So these are just some general thoughts that I've come up with throughout my years. And my hope would be, hey, hopefully something sparks with somebody watching or somebody listening, and they want to follow up and have a more in-depth conversation. So that's kind of my plan here today. Right here on the first slide, kind of whenever I talk about specials, is a great quote. And like any coach, I stole the quote from somebody else, but it is important to me. And that quote is for special teams. Sometimes it seems like it's not important until it's important. And what I mean by that is, everybody really wants to have a great offensive philosophy and a defensive philosophy and put a lot of time into those things. There's no doubt, and there's no doubt that they're important and they win games. But then, special teams kind of goes to the back burner until something bad happens. And then all of a sudden everybody's a special teams fan and a special teams expert all of a sudden, when something goes bad versus, hey, make it important throughout. And I think you'll get a lot better results. So that was a quote again that I got from another coach, but it always made some really good sense to me. So right away, like any coach, we need to thank the players that I've worked with throughout. There's been some really dang good ones. I won't sit here and name too many of them here today, but I wouldn't be here without them, and really appreciate all that they've done. I've been very fortunate. Places I've worked where, we had great young men, and they did what they were asked. So great players. Obviously would like to thank you for having me on today, and then give you congratulations. I saw a tweet about 2,000 subscribers. So that's cool to have cool to have a COVID project that just is kind of blossomed into that, man. So thank you.
Appreciate
Coach
that.
Morrissey, Coach Morrissey is the one who kind of linked us together here. And I got to give Coach Morrissey credit for the job he's done at Moline. I'm a Moline football alum, and he's really made that an important football school once again. So Coach Morrissey, thanks for doing that, but also thanks for hooking you and I up. Obviously, thank the coaches that molded me, which I'm going to talk about here in a slide or so, and then any of the coaches watching or listening too. So a little bit of my background real quick. We want to sit here and talk specials, but like I told you, I think it's important to to know who you're listening to, where they've been, and then I'll also kind of recapped what I learned. But I started right out of high school. I didn't go play college football. I would have been like an undersized old lineman. I didn't move good enough to play a backer. So I knew my football career was done, and just at age 18 started coaching right away, and that was at Moline High School. I was there for 3 years, and boy was I young. I wasn't a good coach because of that, but I learned some things and was fortunate when I went off to Illinois State. There was a really, really good high school there called Normal Community. And I contacted their coach and ended up being able to be there for 2 seasons. And that's where I really learned football. It was all new to me, and I was away from the coaches that I had as a player. I was away from coaching my buddies' younger brothers and all that type of stuff. So that's where I really learned. And I got my first teaching job at a small country school called Warrensburg-Latham. And I guess if there's a young coach listening, a great lesson to take away from that is perspective. So I went from Normal Community, which was a phenomenal school, state champion caliber team, to Warrensburg-Latham, where we didn't do a lot of winning. And I guess you can still learn from it. Maybe you're going to learn what you're not going to do as a coach, but you can still try to put a positive spin on it. From there, I was very fortunate to go to Riverdale High School and become their head coach. I did that for 2 years, and looking back, Coach, boy, was I a bad leader. I kind of told you before we got on here that I actually ended up coaching college football after I was a high school head coach. And man, I wish I would have knew some things. So I was able to take the Riverdale experience, and we won some games. Don't get me wrong, but I was not a fun guy to work with. I do think the players had a good time because we won some games, but man, I was a bad leader. But I was able to turn that into a job at St. Ambrose University, which was a local place, and I give Coach Mike Magistrelli a ton of credit for even interviewing me, and then obviously taking a shot. So that's where special teams really became important to me. I started out as a grad assistant, became our O-line coach, and then in my 3rd year was able to become our special teams coordinator. So I really give St. Ambrose credit. I mean, that's really where I learned everything. And I really learned about organization. So I appreciate you kind of commenting, that I had some stuff detailed out here because they were really first class, and they just taught you how to do everything right. So it was a great experience. I was able to take that and become the defensive coordinator at Coe College, which is also in Iowa. I was able to do that for 1 year. And the reason I did that is because I just wanted something new. I kind of wanted to see how things were done at another place. And then that is spun me here to Lincoln Way Central High School, as you said, in the Chicago suburbs. Was able to get back into the classroom and teach, and been here for 3 years now. So a little bit of my background, and then the people that have really molded me throughout the way. Man, at Moline High School, Coach Kevin Gorgel, he was like a dad to me. He walked out with me on senior night. Just taught me how to be more than a coach. At Normal Community, it was Hud Venerable. Like I said, he taught me football. He taught me a little bit of everything. At Ambrose, we had 3 guys listed here. Mike Magistrelli, again, really taught me about how to do things first class. And with that also is to not complain. You have what you have, make the most of it. If you need something else, find a way to get it done, but complaining's not going to do it. So I give him credit. Tom Anthony was our defensive coordinator at the time, best defensive coach that I've worked with. I've worked with some dang good ones, don't get me wrong, but Tom's kind of my go-to guy there. So, these are people, hey, if you're listening or following on YouTube and you're a Twitter guy, man, look these guys up, and I'm sure they would help any of you out, but they're great guys to follow. And then Matt Drinkle, I've learned a ton from. Matt and I remain close friends. He's at Army now, but man, has he done an incredible job with everything he's touched. And I really learned offense from him. At Coe, it was Tyler Staker, our head guy, who really taught me about people. And then here at Lincoln Way Central, our head coach Jeremy Cordell has really taught me how to operate a full program, especially 9 through 12, and then even under 9th grade. So wanted to give those guys some credit as well. Some up and comers I follow. These are guys, there's a lot of great ones out there, but these are guys that I've been fortunate enough to work with. So if you're not following these guys on Twitter, I think it would help people out. But John Micheletti, heck of a defensive mind. Wes Fleming's he was a great defensive player for us, and what he's done offensively in the college game has been great. And then my old roommate, John Canova, man. John lived with me while we were at Ambrose, and great offensive line coach. So excited to see what pans out for him. You know, as far as special teams and why am I sitting here talking on special teams out of anybody? I know it's going to date a little bit here that we're going to be talking about 2014 and 2015. But this is where I kind of really formulated what worked for me and what worked for our program. At this time, it was at St. Ambrose, but really formulated a new plan for what was going to work, and it did. You know, so that's why I'm kind of referencing all the way back. But you guys can read the numbers here, and man, we weren't overly great in any special teams category. In fact, we were only in the top half in one throughout our entire conference. And it was one heck of a conference that St. Ambrose plays in the mid-states. So anytime you're in the top half, that's great. But we felt we could have been better. And, you know, we looked, Coach Mike Magistrelli and myself in the offseason, and this is a slide taken directly from our playbook going into 2015 when I took over the special teams. But we noticed we were really strong at linebacker and receiver and end and running back, that we had to be better on special teams. So we kind of sat down and said, all right, what needs to change? And, you know, I've got a slide to talk about what we did. But we really stressed that we should have been much better than what we were. So with kind of this newfound approach, we went into 2015, and we went from being in the top half and only one to this time after the 2015 season, we were in the top half in all of them but one. Okay, so we had a pretty dang big swing there. We have to give a ton of credit, again, to players. We had Matt Catiglia as our kicker, who won the Fred Mitchell Award, which for those people that don't know is the #1 award for kickers minus FBS. But anyways, it's JUCO all the way through everybody else. So to have that as an NAIA player, it was only the second time that had ever happened. So he gets a lot of that credit in the kicking game. He was actually the #1 punter. He was the #1 place kicker in the nation. And actually, it's funny because our punt stats, we did a lot of pooch punt, so that actually affected our punt stats a little bit to where we actually probably would have been a little bit better. But anyways, it was proof that the formula worked, you know. And I've been lucky enough the places that I've been in between and since then to carry some of these things with me, and they've continued to work. So. What was the formula? You know, it wasn't lightning in a bottle or anything. We just kind of sat down and really talked about, hey, what's it going to take? So how did we do it? Well, again, our players and our coaches were the biggest thing. So right away, again, we had the top kicker in the nation. That's going to improve your stats right away. We had some really good return guys like Brad Connor, Joey Zito, and there's some other names in there too. But that certainly helped. But the other thing is the reason those guys were out there is because we made a commitment on specials that we were going to play our dudes. You know, I realize a lot of places aren't going to run their quarterback out there on specials, and that's understood. But we treated specials as something, it wasn't going to be a time for breaks, you know. College game's a little bit different. You know, you have more players that are really, really close to cracking the two deep, or that are in the two deep, but maybe not quite starters. So you have a pretty good number of guys around, but again, it wasn't going to be a time to just kind of sit our starters. You see right now, especially with like Alabama and what they're doing on special teams, you know, they're going to obviously go play for another national title. I think that's pretty good proof. They're running their starting corners down on their kickoff team. They got the Heisman Trophy winner returning punts. So I think there's another pretty good proof. One of the biggest thoughts I have, Coach, as a football guy in regards to special teams, if you're a head coach or whatever, and you're kind of kicking around the idea of maybe splitting it up, I'm a true believer in to have a special teams coordinator. Maybe it's two people, but I'm not a believer in, hey, this coach takes punt, this coach takes punt return, this coach takes kickoff, and dividing it up. For two reasons. And number one, I think, is when you have a special teams coordinator and they have that title, I think they take pride. I think it gives you one common voice. And, you know, obviously they're going to work with their head coach for sure. And it's going to be a message of what the head coach wants, don't get me wrong, but at least it's a consistent voice. And the other thing, too, is let's take example. I know probably a popular one is to have your D coordinator be in charge of your punt return. That is probably the last thing the D coordinator looks at every single week. So again, I just feel like if you put a coordinator in place, they're going to take pride and it's going to make things a lot better. And again, I would really think the coordinator role, you don't have to be the world's best XO, or some of the things we're going to talk about today is really how simple we were that made us effective and continue to make us effective in specials at the places I've been fortunate to work at. But isn't really to be this X and O mastermind, but more so to coordinate interactions. Again, what does your head coach want to see? Again, talk to that defensive coordinator about what that other team does so you are prepared when you get that punt return unit out there. But it's really to coordinate things. And again, I know I've said it before, but man, best part about specials is being able to coach both sides of the ball. So I know if, maybe you're at a small school, hey, you're already doing that anyways. But, man, you get to colleges, you get to these bigger high schools, you're probably only coaching one unit on one side of the ball, except specials, you're able to work with everyone. The other part of the formula for us was be simple. The players, special teams isn't their number one position. They're probably they are doing something else. They might be a starter. They might be in the 2 deep, but they have to worry about way more things than special teams. Just like, again, for them, it's probably not the first thing they really dive into. So we wanted to be really, really simple on specials and just get good at the little bit that we did. And again, because players they already had so much on their plate and things to remember. And that's just at football, not to mention they have lives outside. We always talk about specials. It's a third of the game. It's a third of the game. People that's always on people's minds. No one practices it as a third of their time. So I think we fall into a little bit of a trap there. So I think your staff has to sit down where you're at and talk about how much time are you really going to dedicate. I once heard the stat that 1 out of every 5 plays is a special teams play in a game. So obviously 20%. So I looked up our stats last year, and for us, it happened to be 16%. So obviously maybe a little bit lower than that. There's going to be other schools where it's a little bit higher than that. Maybe it's 1/4 of every play. So maybe it's 25%. So I think wherever you're at, it's going to be based on are you a fast offense, a slow offense, an aggressive defense, things like that. I think you need to find out how many plays are actually in your program for specials, and then decide how much time you're going to dedicate to that. Again, be organized. I've worked for some special teams guys where, even though they're the coordinator, it wasn't the first thing on their plate, and they came out there without much of a plan. And my talk off to that would be, man, you script everything else. You go out to practice with an offensive script and a defensive script, and again, everything else is scripted. So if specials is important to you, you're going to come out there with a script too. And I know a lot of guys are already doing that, but there's sadly some who aren't. And then the last thing, it's special teams, so make it special. I know that sounds cheesy, but have some goals, have some rewards or awards, whatever you want to do, man. At St. Ambrose, I bought an old wooden sledgehammer for $10. We're able to paint it. We gave that out. Guys had to carry it with them for the week. We joked that they should be carrying it to class and the house parties and things like that. And luckily they knew we were joking and they didn't. But, we try to make it special. And again, if it is special, don't wait till the end. Shouldn't be the last thing you're doing in practice every single day. Hey, maybe some days it is, or maybe you always want to end with field goal kicking, something like that for sure. But man, don't put specials as the last 20 minutes every single day. So that's what kind of made us successful, in my opinion. So today, I'm a big guy on the iceberg theory. As I was telling you, I teach woodworking, and woodworking is like special teams in the fact that you can really go 2 ways. You can go a mile wide or you can go a mile deep. So today, I'm going to be a mile wide with special teams. I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to talk not in depth on a lot. I'm going to talk very little about a lot of things in hopes that somebody wants to have a follow-up conversation on something more in depth. So today, and when you're learning, I think it should be a little bit more of the mile wide approach. But then when you find out what you want to do, man, you better get a mile deep. You better really know that thing inside and out. For me, it's been for shield punt. Shield punt, something I really have been able to get a mile deep in throughout my career, and it's really just because the places I've worked, they wanted to be shield punt teams. So it's kind of just happened that way. But again, take a little bit of everything, but then find out what you really want to do and really get to know it. We all know the importance of special teams. This is something that everybody has seen in some form. Sometimes it's in a picture of the actual field. This just happens to be a chart. This is a chart that I put in all my special teams playbooks as I went. But really, especially here at the high school level, Coach, we know the importance of when the offense starts the ball with the ball to -20. Okay, and that's going to come into our kickoff talk. But again, everyone's seen something similar to this. But boy, you should have it in front of your players as well, just so they understand. Again, whether it's a picture or a chart, figure out what works best for you and for them. But we all know starting field position and what that means to scoring. So right away, jumping into kickoff, it's talking a little bit about what I've said before is use your dudes. But first off, it's the first play of defense. Again, I referenced Alabama. They run their starting cornerbacks down there. So again, use your guys and use guys that can run. Okay, maybe they're a two deep guy, but dang, they can run. You know what I mean? So that would be my first thought of kickoff, and really that's kind of bounced off here with the second thought. But again, going with guys that run and talking about awarding them or rewarding them, however you want to word that, is, man, if you have a touchback, if you have the guy, which is probably the most important thing of kickoff, which we'll talk about here, but if you have a guy that's going to give you consistent touchbacks, even then your team should be flying and reward the first guy that crosses the goal line on that touchback. That's something that we've done here at Lincoln Way Central, and it's been cool for our guys. So get guys out there that can run. But deep down, it probably all comes down to the kicker. If you have a guy that can consistently put it in the end zone, that's your dude. Again, I referenced it on the last page, but man, here in high school football, if it goes in the end zone, it's a touchback, and the ball comes out to the -20. There's no better thing going on for you than that. The slides say it takes, the scoring percentage there is anywhere from 3 to 13%. So we would all take that defensively every time. For me, for kickoff, it hasn't been a ton about scheme because there's only a few ways you can line up anyways. Recently they put the rules in place, like you're either going to be a 5x5 or you're going to be some version of 6x4. So it isn't really a ton about scheme as much as it is dudes. Find a kicker who can put it in the end zone. And then if you can't, and you're not always going to be able to, which is a point I'll bring up here, if you can't, man, you better have guys that can fly around and run down there to get it covered. I'm a big believer in directional kicks. Now, hey, if it's a touchback, sure, we don't care where it is, left, middle, right, whatever, if you have a guy that's always going to put it there. But the chances are he probably isn't going to always put it there, even if he's a great kicker, and that's because of the weather, So we had different kicking zones, which I'll show you here on the next slide. So again, even with that best kicker, you're going to play in the cold, you're going to play in wind, and there's times where kicking it into the end zone isn't going to work. So you have to have a plan. What is your plan during that? Are you a squib team? Are you going to maybe throw a surprise onside in there to try and steal one? For me, where I've been, it's always been we've had some guys that could sky kick. And, man, there's nothing better than a sky kick. It's actually just happened. Worked out great for Iowa State in their bowl game. Put that thing, now for them, I don't think it was wind-related, but later on in the year, what I'm talking about is, hey, put that thing up in the wind, let it hang up there. And, man, if it starts to drift its way back towards your cover team, it's a beautiful thing. So, again, having a great kicker at Ambrose, we were able to steal 2 big possessions in 2 really big games by doing that. And there's probably nothing that charges your team up besides a blocked kick. Nothing excites your team more or your sideline than getting a possession that way. And the last thing on kickoffs is we always taught about different zones. So that first level blocker, we always taught to avoid him. That is a guy, man, if you get tied up, remember, we want you to run. So if you start tying up with that first level guy, even though he might not get a big shot on you, he slowed you up enough to where you're almost blocked, So avoid those first level guys. The second, now we've covered more ground. Now we've reached the second level guys trying to block us. Those are the guys we want to engage with a rip move. And then at that third level, those are the guys it's going to be the ball carrier. Those are the guys that we really want to attack. So, again, just some general kickoff thoughts. These were the zones that we used. I mean, obviously, there's a neutral zone where the ball can end up. But, hey, anytime we talked about an onside, that's where we expected the ball to be, somewhere between the 45s. And, again, you do it directionally. So, hey, an onside left, an onside right, a middle sky, something like that. So our kickers had to know this, too, when we called something, where we expected that ball to be placed. And then, obviously, the team that had to go down and cover, the guys that were on that needed to know this as well. So knowing kicking zones and using different kicking zones has been huge with my experience in specials. Kickoff return. It was Coach Magistrelli at Ambrose who really kind of brought this idea to my attention and made sense to me. And it's funny, when we talk punt return, I'll actually talk about the opposite, which is fine. But sideline return is kind of a guessing game. Okay, it's kind of a 50-50. Scouting absolutely helps you. Okay, but if the ball's in the middle of the field, you really don't know which way they're going to kick it. So, for example, if you call a right return, I don't know, maybe you want to return to your sideline or whatever reason you want to go right, and they kick it all the way to your left returner, man, you might have guessed wrong there. So what's your answer? Is your answer you tell him just to take what he can get, or are you asking him to try to come all the way across the field? And how does that affect your timing? So it was a guessing game. Now, hey, if it was kicked to the right returner, man, you guessed right and everything probably timed up perfect. So we felt like, hey, it was a guessing game, and it was either going to end up really, really good or really, really bad. And, again, we wanted to keep it simple. So we said, hey, we're going to have one return, and which was a middle return, because we felt like no matter where that ball was kicked, we only had to get to the middle of the field for our return to look good. Okay, so I'm a believer on kickoff return to be a middle return, because you just don't know where the ball's going unless you really have enough kicks on your opponent to where you really have them scouted and know exactly what they're going to do. The other reason middle return was great for us is we always block the same guy. All right. Now, I talked to, and I won't talk in depth right now, but I talked to about the nature of where you block that guy might change, okay, based on where he's coming from. But you always block the same number guy. So, for example, our ends would always block number 3, okay? And that was important to us, again, that they only had to know one thing. We go back to our ends on kickoff. We're actually probably tight ends or linebackers for us. The rest of the time, they already had enough to remember. So they just had to remember, hey, I blocked number 3 to my side, right? It wasn't very complicated for them. It wasn't well on right return. I got to block the left 5, but on the opposite side return, I got to block the number 4. It was just less for them. The other thing it did for us, we had one return that we got to practice a ton and allowed us to become a great return team. From there, that's your building block is middle return. From there, you can start to add in some very simple variations, okay? So then at that point, we would add what we called a cross return. What was awesome is it didn't change anything for anybody except 2 people. And they still blocked the same number guy. They just blocked the guy on the opposite side of the field, okay, and kind of gave you a little cross action in the middle of that. So number 1, it was a good variation. It put more stuff on film that our opponents had to break down. The other thing is, let's say, hey, you went out there, the first 2 kick returns, in a college game, you just have more kick returns because the game's longer and there's a little bit more scoring. But let's say you went out there and the first 2 times you did middle return and, man, it wasn't very successful. If you call middle return again, your players don't have a lot of buy-in at that time. So cross return gave us maybe an answer if we felt like our players were stuck. Okay, it was a little variation for us. And then I think you can still have a sideline return, but it's not until your middle return is perfected. And I think you can have the sideline return by blocking the same number of people. Okay, so I still block 3 or I still block 5, whatever it is. And again, you just block them in a different direction. Okay, so this time, hey, instead of blocking them It really ends up being for one half of the field. For one half of the field, it's exactly the same, and for your other half of the field, they just block them a different way. It's the same dude that they've been blocking or been practicing blocking all week. So felt like that was a good answer for us as well. For punt, I think the first thing is to talk about what style do you want to be and why do you want to be that. Again, just the places that I've worked, it just happened this way, that the coaches that I've worked for wanted to be a shield punt type team. So to me, the shield is probably the most simple to teach. It's probably the easiest to teach. So that worked out great. The whole part of this was to keep things simple for our players. I don't know that pro's all that much harder. I'm not a big pro punt guy just because I know enough about it, but not a huge one just because I haven't really sat there. I haven't learned it a mile deep, right? If we go back to those icebergs, I do think pro punt is a much better way to have some fakes though. If you're going to be at a place where you think you need to have punt fakes to really win games, man, I think pro punt might be your answer. Or do you want to be something niche? Do you want to be a place where teams really have to spend some time on what you do? Maybe it's a rugby type of punt. I've seen systems where people use two punters and all that different stuff. So sit down with your head coach, or obviously your head coach sits down with you, however you want to work that. But talk about what style you want to be and really think about why. For me, punt is all about snap and operation time, okay? Obviously, if the snap's on the ground or over the guy's head, it really doesn't matter what punt you're in, okay? So it's all about having a great snapper, and then how fast can you get it off. With shield, there's going to be something I'm going to talk about on the next slide. With shield, I am all about releasing guys early. But if your punter can't get rid of the ball quick enough, you can't do that. So really focus on that snap and that operation time. And again, I know that isn't anything, anything like, oh, wow, that's amazing that you focus on the snap. But it is something to just continue to hammer with your team and with your coaches and as part of your philosophy. For me, with shield, I think you carry one run fake and you carry one pass fake that you have confidence in. I don't think you draw up a ton of different fakes. I don't think you draw up a bunch of different fakes. I think you have a few. I think you have one type of a run, one type of a pass you have confidence in, and maybe you add one after you use one, sure. And then the other thing I think with that is I think you need to have one of those fakes be against a very aggressive block team, and one of those fakes be against a return style team. And then from there, you can kind of piece it into which one goes against what. I know what's been decent for us at the places I've been. And in fact, again, at that great year at Ambrose, we ran both of them and they both worked. One was against the team that brought everybody, and we just dumped it over those guys' head. It was a little pass. And then against the team that dropped everybody into coverage, we just ran the ball right up the middle of the field. So again, just from my own experience, that's what's worked for me. But it is the thing, I believe. And I don't think you draw up a new fake every week because, again, you guys have to remember it. And then I also don't think you need a bunch of them anyways because you're not going to use a ton of them. With that being said, the other side to that, if you are going to use fakes, is you can't only do it at the -45 when it's 4th and 2 and everybody in the stadium thinks you're probably going to fake it, So if you truly want to utilize fakes to the best of your ability as a coach, you have to do it in some situations that are a little unconventional. Obviously, if you're just the coordinator, if you're not the head coach, if you're just the coordinator, man, you got to make sure that head guy is on board with that and gives you the green light to do so. Or he's, probably it's a situation where he's the guy that's actually saying, yeah, this is where we'll do it. So make sure, again, you continue to work with that head coach. I think the number one thing most teams probably miss on their punt stuff, especially, again, I'm going to probably talk a little bit more about shield here. But the number one thing they don't teach is to read the rusher. What is the intent of that rusher? What is that guy trying to do? Okay. And I got a little slide for that here coming up. And then the last thing, as far as a general thought with punt, is, everybody knows how important it is to pin them, right? It goes back to that percentage chart that we showed at the very beginning. Just make sure you're finding a way to drill that, Okay. That is not 100% on your punter. That is a huge piece to it, but you got to have guys that run down there and cover it and know how to cover it. Okay. Another thing I didn't mention, I'll actually mention in a few slides, is teach your guys the rules of special teams. They probably don't know the key rules for each one. Okay. So, hey, again, if pinning them is something you really want to take pride in, make sure you're drilling it and make sure it's not just your punter doing it off on his own, and making sure those cover guys know the rules and know the ins and outs on how to do that properly. So I talked about the intent of the rusher. Again, I think this is probably the number one thing that's helped the coverage side of the shield punts that I've been involved with. And it's pretty simple, okay? It's what the team you're going against is doing. They're either returning or they're going to try for a block. So let's see what that rusher's doing, okay? If he's off the line of scrimmage, he's not coming. If he does come, he's going to be late, because remember, it's all about operation time, okay? So if he's off the line of scrimmage and ends up blocking the punt, you don't have a blocking issue. You have an operation time issue, okay? So number one, if your guy's off the line of scrimmage, it's a return. We're gonna gamble and think, hey, it's a return. You release right away. You don't have to stay in and block. If your man that you're responsible to block is telling you it's a return, then you release right away. The other thing, if his stance is square, if he's 2-point stance and his feet are square, it's probably a return too. He's probably sitting there trying to hold you up at the line of scrimmage. So you release right away. It's not until his stance staggers, like he's trying to come out of the block, or he gets into a 3-point. At that point, you're thinking it's more of a block. He's coming, so now you got to stick in and block a little longer. That's worked out great for us. Very fortunate. The places that I've worked, we have not had blocked punts. Part of it is because the shield, and we just naturally have people so spread out. But teaching rusher intent has been big for us too. And the other side of that, not only have we not had punts blocked, we haven't given up big returns because our guys are down there so fast. Because I would say on an average punt, out of our 7 dudes up front, we probably get 4 to 5 of them that can release right away, because they've read their rusher's intent. So that's been huge for us, Coach. Punt return. Kind of going with reading the intent of rushers, there's only so many things you can do. And you're either a block team or you're a return team. I think you have to be realistic that you're not going to be great at both. You have to carry both. There's no doubt. I personally, for multiple reasons, I'm a block guy. Okay, I think punt block is the way to go. I'd rather be an aggressive block team than a return team. But we all know there's situations where you're going to have to return a punt. So you have to carry both of them, sure. However, when you get outside of what you want, so for me, when it is returns, you have to be realistic. If you're a block team, I don't know how much you should expect your return man to run for touchdowns, because it's not what you practice at that point. Now, if you got an absolute stud back there, that's probably the one thing that could cancel that out. But if you're a block team, that's what you practice. So when you have a return on, what is important to you? Is it 10 yards? Is it simply hold on to the football? But it probably shouldn't be, it should be a touchdown every time, because, again, that's not important to you. You're a block team, okay? So, again, I think you're one or the other. Yeah, I realize you got to carry both, but you need to be realistic when you do. Again, I'm more of a block guy. Number one, I'm just kind of an aggressive guy by my own nature, and so are the coaches that I've worked for with that unit. The other thing I would say is you don't have to actually block it for it to be successful. Just sending guys and getting near the punter, especially at the high school level, man, you can put some pressure on him without physically touching the football. That still ends up very effective for you. And the other thing I think about block is I think it's really easy to drill in the summer. I'll kind of go on here that punt return I think is the hardest, because you have to react to how they line up. It's pretty much a kind of a defensive situation. So that is one thing that might change week to week, is how you line up your punt return team. Well, to move your pieces around every week and then still have to teach them a return, I think that gets more complicated versus, hey, you can move them around each week, but still have the same block principles that you had the week before. And I think that's been most successful. So again, especially in the summer when, hey, you're just kind of going against some general punt looks. I think it's easier to drill in the summer. For me, this is your chance for sideline return because you probably have an idea if the ball is going to be kicked left or right, especially if the ball is on a hash. So to me, this is the exact opposite of kickoff. Kickoff, you don't know where the ball is going unless you have a great scouting report based on a huge number of kicks, which you might not, especially at the high school level. But if the ball is on a hash, you probably know that ball is going to be kicked down that hash. Not a lot of punters are going to kick the ball across the field to lose yardage. So now you have a much more educated guess of where the punt is going to be kicked to. And so you can set up a sideline return. So for me, again, kickoff is middle return. Punt return is a sideline return because you have a better idea. What's funny is Coach Mark Hendrickson. I worked with his son Myers at Coe College. Myers is now the head coach at Kansas Wesleyan. But Mark Hendrickson is a special teams guru. He was the special teams coordinator at Georgia Tech when they won a national title back, I believe it was 1990. Okay. But what's funny is he is the exact opposite. He thinks sideline returns should be on kickoff because the ball's in the air longer and you have more time to set things up. Okay, or the ball's going farther, I should say. So he believes your sideline return happens on kickoff. He thinks middle return should be on punt return because you just get it and you can go straight ahead right now. Again, he obviously knows what he's talking about. He knows what's been successful for him, and I'm sitting here saying the opposite, and it's been successful for me. So I think you got to sit down as a staff and really figure out what works best for you, and that's what you gravitate towards.
Coach,
this is yeah.
And not to do a shameless plug here, but since you mentioned Myers Hendrickson, it's ironic. I've had like 3 phone conversations with him in the past week. He is a speaker for our state clinic this year.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we actually announced him today, actually. Ironically, so
yeah.
I just thought it was a little funny that you mentioned him. I was wondering when I was looking at the screen, I'm like, which Coach Hendrickson does he be? Because
okay, yep,
that's funny.
Yep. So yeah. So obviously, that Coach Hendrickson on the screen is his dad. But man, that you guys got a good one coming to speak there.
Well, and ironically, the next person you're about to mention that's on your slide, well, we've not announced him yet, but by the time this video appears, we'll announce Jimmy Flynn. I like Jimmy. Jimmy does a lot of good stuff. Jimmy, I mean, I feel like if you were to compare my special teams intelligence to his, like I feel like I'm in kindergarten compared to him being a master's degree. Like
yes,
like I mean the man loves special teams beyond all means and knows
absolutely.
His stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. To go back to, well, first off, you hit home runs and getting both of those guys there. To go back to Coach Hendrickson, the son now, Myers, who's at Kansas Wesleyan, he's another guy that comes from the Drinkle tree like I do. So he and I have good rapport. It was great to work with him when we did. He's doing an awesome job down there in Kansas. And then the next one, Coach, talk about Coach Jimmy Flynn. You said it. You want to talk special team knowledge, guy who really loves it. This guy has it. What's funny is he was part of specials. I don't know that he was the coordinator back in 2015 and 14 in those years. But basically, St. Ambrose and St. Xavier play each other. Yeah. They were so great on specials. We knew if we ever got around them in the special team category, that we had done some pretty good things. I don't have it on this slide or anywhere in the PowerPoint. They taught us a phenomenal lesson about tight punt. So if anybody ever wants to talk about the St. Xavier lesson on tight punt, man, we learned that one the hard way. Luckily, there was a flag on it, so we got to re-kick it, and it worked out a little bit better for us. But, they do some phenomenal stuff. So it's funny, Coach, kind of continuing on here with what I learned from him, is this offseason I really started to study punt blocking. And again, I've had some stuff that worked for me, but I mentioned earlier, I don't know in a special teams world if there's anything that supports your team more than blocking kicks. Okay, I think it's the number one way to charge your team up is to block kicks. So I really wanted to focus more on it. Was fortunate enough to in March, kind of right when COVID happened, to get with Coach Flynn and stole some really good ideas from him. And it was just because you send more people doesn't increase your chance of blocking a punt. And in fact, not that he said it this way, I would argue it might even decrease it. Okay. So you got to cover the 2 eligible guys, or you got to have some formula for that. I get that. But sending as many people as you can is not a good formula. Multiple things are going to happen. Number one, they're going to run into each other. Okay. They have a much higher percentage now of running into the punter as well. All right. And then the other thing that he talked about, which really made sense, is you don't have 9 guys on your team that have the skill set to block a punt anyways. At most, you have 3 to 4 guys, and they still have to be coached on it. But at most, you have 3 to 4 guys that could consistently have a chance at blocking a kick, okay, or blocking a punt in this case. Those are the guys that you need to scheme something up for them to get to the kicker. Okay, or again, in this case, the punter. So I have Nick Farrell pictured here. Nick was one of those guys that he just had the natural ability for us last year to get skinny and get through things and go pressure punts. So looking back, we probably would have done some things a little bit different to highlight our guys who did have the ability to do it versus send a lot of dudes. Okay, so I'm become a big believer in that because of Coach Flynn. For me, since we've been a block team, the number one thing I would stress, again, we wanted to be realistic. Every time a team kicked it to us, we weren't going to block it. Every time a team kicked it to us, we weren't going to return it for a touchdown. Our biggest thing was this. They are giving us the ball. By running their punt unit out there, they are saying, we're giving you guys the ball. Make sure we keep it, okay? That really factors on 3 things. Number one, if it is punted successfully for them, man, your return guys, I always tell him he has 3 rules, and all 3 rules are to catch the ball. Okay, really to catch the ball and retain the ball. That's another thing, too, about sending 9. If you send a ton of guys, you are really hanging that punt returner out to dry. Okay, at that point, he's got a ton of dudes running in his face when he has to, it's probably going to be a fair catch, too. He has a ton of dudes in his face to try to fair catch it. But, again, how do you keep the ball is obviously you have to have a great returner that can catch everything. You allow no fakes, right? That's something that every team is going to preach on. And then the other is obviously you don't rough the punter because you just kept the sticks moving for him anyway. So continuing to harp on those 3 things fell under our umbrella of, hey, they're giving us the ball. Make sure that we keep it. To talk extra point and then extra point block or PAT, extra point field goal, whatever you guys want to call it. Again, for PAT itself, I think you got to talk about what type of team do you want to be. Sit down with that head coach, and your head coach is going to have 1 of 2 philosophies. He's either going to just say, no, we're taking points, we line up and kick it, we don't want to waste time and all that type of stuff. Or he might be a guy who wants to have some fun. He might be a guy who wants to gain an advantage. Okay. Then if your head coach says, yeah, let's do something different. Let's be a team that gains an advantage. You have to decide what advantage are you really wanting to gain. And to me, there's 2 ways to do that. You can try to gain a formation advantage, which really then equals points, right? So let's say the popular one I'll probably talk about today is swinging gate. That's probably the one that's kind of different, but a lot of people know about it, okay? So if your head guy says, yeah, I want to gain an advantage, let's do swinging gate. Well, at that point, what is your swinging gate looking for? Are you a team that if you have the numbers, you're going to take that, let's say you're going to say it's the throw portion of a swinging gate. If you always have the numbers, you are 100% of the time going to throw it. At that point, you're looking for a formation or a points advantage, okay? The other way to do it is, hey, teach swinging gate, but like 99% of the time, you're going to come back and line up and kick it. You have created a time advantage. because you now know your opponent has to waste their time every week to go over how to cover your swinging gate. So even though, yep, you're going to line right back up and kick it, and you know that, they don't know that, and you've gained an advantage through time now. So again, what advantage do you want to gain? To me, I think one of the biggest things on PAT is to just constantly remind your guys what they are. They're a unit designed to score points. Again, field goal as well. I'm kind of talking about the two interchangeably, but they score points. That is their job, okay? So you have to remind them of that, and they have to take pride in that. I think sometimes when that isn't communicated, PAT just becomes something we do after we score. Hey, the rules say after we score a touchdown, we got to run out there and kick it. If it gets blocked, it gets blocked. Who cares? It's only 1 point, right? We've all been a part of a game where that 1 point is won or lost as football games, as coaches. So continue to remind those guys their job is to score points and to take pride in that. And then again, kind of like a punt philosophy, you need to have 1 to 2 fakes and then actually use them. I was part of a program where, I'm not kidding, we had close to 10 extra point fakes, and we never used one the entire season. So you want to talk about wasting time. In that situation, it was the exact reverse. We were wasting our own time at that point because we had all these fakes that we repped every week that we never used. So number 1, have 1 or 2 fakes. That way you're efficient with your own time, but only practice them if you're going to use them. And another little trick, I think, throw a fake on film early, because again, every team that you then play afterwards is going to see it, and then they have to spend their time on it. So, hey, sometime, maybe it's not the first game, because the first games never go the way we want them to anyways, and maybe you never put yourself in that position. But early in the season, game 2, game 3, put a fake on film just, again, to spend some of your opponent's time. And then to finish up, PAT thoughts, PAT block thoughts, extra point thoughts, field goal thoughts, whatever you want to call it. Especially if it's extra point, you're in a bad situation. You just gave up a touchdown. It sucks. We all know it. Okay. The first thing though to communicate to your guys is what is their body language? What is their image? What are you portraying that every single team that you play is going to see? If you come out there and hey, after every touchdown, you sit there and hang your head, and your PAT block team just kind of goes through the motions and slow get off and doesn't really have a hard push, I really think you've given the other team a huge advantage just through spirit, maybe, for lack of a better term right now. Just because you don't take a lot of pride in what you put out there. There was, I believe, and I could have this wrong, but I believe it was Coach Collins, who's I believe it's Jeff Collins. Okay, again, I could be saying this wrong, but I think he had an article this year on Football Scoop about, hey, it's one of the first things he watches. What is the body language of their extra point block team? Okay. So again, what image are you putting out there? The reverse. I think you constantly have to remind this unit that they prevent points. Okay. You have to celebrate blocked kicks. I would argue, I was actually thinking about this today, how to best communicate this, especially a field goal, because we know that they're worth more points. But where I've been, a blocked field goal, that counts as a takeaway. We all know the importance defensively of takeaways. You should be counting blocked field goals as takeaways. Think about how fewer opportunities you have to block a field goal than you do to create a takeaway through a normal football play. So, man, they're more rare. You should really celebrate blocked kicks. Okay, and again, that puts an importance back to it. And remember, it's all about making it important. Work with your D coordinator. You could say these same things as far as your punt return scheme, but work with your D coordinator. Have a plan for the weird stuff, the gadget stuff. Hey, if you know that they're a swinging gate team, work with your D coordinator on how you want to defend that, but you might have to stay in his ear about it. You got to remember, it's probably the last thing he's worried about. He's not worried about defending swinging gate on Monday, okay? He might start thinking about it Wednesday, and by that time, it's too late. So, again, I think you got to be realistic and understand that it's important to you, and that you might have to continue to bring it up to him. And you know how to approach your D coordinators and when's a good time and things like that. And then the other side, the PAT block, again, there's two approaches. You can be a team that always finds a weakness. Hey, this player is bad this week. This is the guy we want to attack. Next week, it might be a different player. This is the guy we want to attack. Or you can be a team that says, I'm going to use block middle for my example, but it could be anything. It could be block right or whatever you think is best for you. Do you want to be a team that changes weekly based on their weakest player? Or do you want to be a team that says, no, we're a block middle team. That's what we do. Okay. So again, keep it simple for yourself. Even if you are a team that is going to find a weakness, man, you should pretty much though still run the same block. The block shouldn't change. It should just maybe be who you're focusing on for that block. So again, Coach, I'm not the mastermind here, but these are some things that have worked for me. Probably the last three things that I didn't get into, even though I did get into one of these, probably the things that I would really stress to coordinators is, again, number one, teach your players about the rules. Your players don't know all the ins and out rules of special teams, okay? They know some, and you really only got to teach them the big key ones, okay? But teach your players the rules because they don't know them. So for me, that's always the first slide in our playbook. I do our playbook through PowerPoint. For me, it's always the first slide is the key rules that they need to know for that special team. So, man, are you really putting an importance on it if that's the first slide, okay? The other thing I would encourage guys, especially at the bigger high schools or at the colleges, is find a way. For me, summer camp's been a good answer. Some places are doing 2-a-days, some aren't, depending on what level you're at. But to me, it's find a way to get all of your players tackling, okay, especially early in the year, because you're going to use offensive guys on special teams, and they have not been tackling for a while, okay? Again, especially if you're at a place where guys only play one side of the ball, okay? So find a way. Work with your head coach, but find a way. When can those receivers who you're going to run down on punt, okay, when can you find a way to not just once, not just twice, but how can you have a little bit of time with them to review tackling and get them tackling? The other thing it does is it's always going to find you one or two guys that really know how to tackle, and now all of a sudden he's on every special team, okay? So that's always a good one too, man. Get those offensive guys out there tackling as well. And then the last thing, and this is it's funny that Coach Hendrickson as well, because this is 100% taken from him, is find a time to do either wet ball or wet hand drills. At some point in the season, you're going to have a time where your snapper, it's a rain game, and your snapper has to snap with wet hands, or your punter has to catch the ball with wet hands, or your punter has to kick a wet football, whatever it is, okay? Find a time to drill that stuff. Your players need it, right? And I go back to kind of wrap this whole thing up, that it's not important until it's important. Well, if you wait to do if the first time your snapper touches a wet football is in the rain game, you've done a disservice to him. You have to prep him with those things earlier than the game itself, or earlier than the sideline of the game, okay, to give him reps to do that. So yeah, we'll take a practice or two in the summer, and we will occasionally throw one throughout the week in our season. We all have old footballs laying around. We legit take a bucket of water out there with us. We might sprinkle a little water on the ball. We might have our punt return guy dip his hands in the bucket before a kick comes to him. But make sure you're finding a way to work those wet ball or those wet hand drills into your stuff. I think those are three key things that sometimes get forgotten about, that I would want to give that advice to any coordinator. The older guys are probably doing them, but especially young special teams coordinators, I think those are really, really key things to help you. So, Coach, I know some guys will be able to see this. The goal for me was to get you thinking about things today as coaches and or coordinators, and then hopefully have some follow-ups. I love talking specials. I've kind of already explained why, but I love talking about it. Hopefully there's something I said today that interests you, that you want to talk more on, whether it's yourself, Coach, or any of the coaches listening, because like anyone, man. We love talking specials. That's why we're here.
A couple things real quick. Obviously, for those watching, his email's on the screen, but if you're not watching, listening, it'll be in the bio, like all of his contact information, like normal. So, like I said, I think Coach did a great job there talking about some special teams thoughts. I wrote down 2 quick questions while I was listening. So kind of going back to the shield punt philosophy on fakes and carrying 2, and you're a shield guy. Do you think the shield punt limits your ability to run fakes?
I personally do.
Okay.
I personally do. On the reverse of that, I'm also sitting here and saying I'm okay with that because, again, I only think you need to have a few. My only other comment on that, Coach, would be where I think it limits you is it depends who you use in your shield.
Yeah.
If you're a team that's going to run 3 of your biggest linemen out on your shield, then yes, it has limited you. If you're a team that is going to put, let's say, a tight end, a backer, and I don't know, maybe your biggest running back out there as your 3 shield guys, at that point, I don't know that it has. At that point, I think you could sit there and be creative with it. But definitely, if you're a team that runs 3 linemen back there, yeah, you've taken away a few things for sure.
Okay. And then my second one I wrote down was about PAT fakes. You mentioned you guys had a bunch in that year and didn't use any of them. But what determines for you whether you're going to run a fake or not? Because I know a lot of high school coaches, their philosophy, if I'm going to fake an extra point or a field goal, I might as well just leave my offense on the field.
Yeah, and I see that side of it too. I totally do. Like anything, you could argue, okay, if you leave your offense out on the field, the one argument is, hey, we only got to be right 50% of the time. I get that. Versus you certainly have lost an element of surprise if you keep your offense out there. So to me, and it's been a while since I've been a head coach making those decisions. To me, it's been about more of again, I don't want to really just hammer it with the element of surprise, but it's have a couple, again, 1 to 2 in your pocket to use when you need them. Another thing too, where, and I know I said it, I want to try to get you to waste as much time as possible because time is one of the very few things we all have the same amount of. Okay. We all have different players. All right. But we have the same amount of time. Okay. So I want to get you to waste your time. So by me doing some fakes, I'm now getting you to waste a little bit of time on those. Okay. That's why, again, I believe in putting a fake on film early in the season. If you are going to just keep your offense out there, you're probably running one of your normal plays anyways, right? I don't know that you created a time advantage anywhere in there.
Okay.
But again, I understand some people are going to, the thing of, hey, we only have to be right half the time. So I get that side of it too. It's just the things that have worked for me.
Okay. And then you mentioned, I got one more because I don't want to make this a 16-hour podcast because I think me and you could just chit-chat forever. I think we've discovered that both of us like to talk and like to talk special teams. So you mentioned middle return on punt return. Do you find, at least in your state, I think every state's a little differently, that setting up an actual punt return is difficult because of how erratic high school punting is?
100%. Totally agree. So I go back to quickly here, not to continue the podcast, right? But I go back to if you decide you're going to be a return team, okay? You and your head coach, whatever, you decide we're going to be a return team. Coach, I would have 2 returners back there.
That was going to be my follow-up question was, have you ever, like, that? I mean, that's something I've toyed with, like, if I end up doing special teams next year, depending on the job situation and all that, we need to talk off screen about that. Yeah. And by the time this comes out, that'll be known. But, like, that's the other thing is, like, if I wanted a separate return, I'd put 2 back there. Like, at this point.
Absolutely.
My only problem with the 2 return, I think you're a little more susceptible to fakes. Which is, I mean, it's that double-edged sword. Danged if you do, danged if you don't.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not arguing. I think what might put you at ease in that situation, though, is you got to remember you're a return team, so you're not sending a ton of dudes.
Yeah.
So your front guys are a little bit more of a defensive shell than they have their hand in the ground and they're going to sit there and go full bore. So I think that's how you could kind of negate that. Keep it simple, right? If you're the returner who doesn't have the ball, you're always the lead blocker for them. And then the other things too, this is just for me, I didn't put it in there. I'm not a wall guy because of the same reasons you're talking about. Setting up walls for punt return look great on paper, and then the ball hits one of the guys who, your left, your left defensive lineman ends up on the right side of the field and gets hit by the football because that's what the wall return tells them to do. So that also kind of plays into some other things we talked about. But I think that's a heck of an answer.
I mean, I don't like the time. I personally don't like the time consumption that a wall return takes to perfect it, and it's kind of goes back to your kick sideline return. Like, what if he kicks on the complete opposite side of it becomes it's a mess. For this level, I think college is a little more. It's college and pros, that stuff's a little more predictable. Or at least you kind of understand what their tendencies are based off the looks you get, all that lovely stuff.
For sure.
So, but this is another episode of Kick and Cut Podcast for Coach Schroder. We appreciate him coming on. Make sure, again, his contact information will be in the bio, his email, his Twitter. Follow him on Twitter. Reach out to him. And again, subscribe to these videos. It helps the channel out so people can find him a little easier and kind of spread the word. But Coach, thank you again, and I hope you get to play in some fashion this spring.
Yeah, so do we. But Coach, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you again on behalf of myself, where I currently work at Lincoln Way Central, and then hopefully for some of those coaches that I mentioned earlier that helped mold me along the way. Thank you, and thank you on behalf of all of us for doing what you're doing. I know we talked that. You put a lot of time into it, so it's been a great project for you, and I'm glad to see it going so well. So thanks again, Coach, very much.
Thank you, Coach.